Hi guys, welcome to the new episode of Baby Steps into the Yogic Life, which will now be known as Soulfully Smart because I thought the Baby Steps into the Yogic Life was a little too long and it didn't really quite have this roll off the tongue sort of quality, which I think is very important uh, for a very big talk show that has so many people listening to it. So, Amal, jokes apart, we will now be known as soulfully smart. So, yeah. Anyway. So, we were discussing the last time about yamas and niyamas. Niyamas are internal laws of conduct for a yogi, and yamas are external codes of conduct for a yogi, right? We always go from out to in. So, first we're going from yamas, then we shall, in the future episodes, go towards niyamas. So, as we were covering the yamas, we covered the first yama, which was ahimsa. So, ahimsa meaning non violence. I already spoke about non violence the last time. So, if you want to revisit the last episode, then I would totally encourage you to do so, and I will drop a link in the description below. For now, we will continue into the topic of yamas and follow the next yama. Okay, so to cover and to finish off the yama of ahimsa, what we forget to tell you is that when Patanjali or in the yogic shastras, when they talk about any kind of yama or niyama that one is supposed to follow, they also give you the disadvantages and the advantages. We spoke about the disadvantages of not following a yama, which is the result of not following a yama is that it takes you out of your center. So, because you are not in your center, you tend to be unaligned and therefore are not a very not in your perfect alignment as a yogi. And as we discussed, being a yogi is all about being in perfect or trying to be in perfect alignment, right? So, the yama of ahimsa takes you out of your center is because a violent thought or a violent way of being makes you take wrong decisions. And just following the laws of karma, which is central obviously to ancient Hindu texts, the law of karma would state that very very basically that you reap what you sow. So like whatever you do will come back to you, right? So just technically, if you are violent towards other people, it will come back to you in some other way or shape or form. So, the advantage of following ahimsa is that everybody drops their violent thoughts in your presence. Have you ever met like a person who's really, really sweet and soft spoken and really, really nice? Even if you are really in a bad mood, usually their presence just tends to make you happy. We're like, oh, this guy, I love this guy. So, your your violent thoughts or your negative thoughts tend to fall in this person's presence, right? So that is the advantage of following the yama of ahimsa. Okay, so this is so cool, right? So like our olden times, the rishis were so smart to talk about the disadvantages, this thing that would actually happen to you if you don't follow something, meaning the stick, and they also like dangled a carrot in front of you of saying that if you do follow it, this is what you get in return. So imagine being somebody who, like, always just gets everybody in their best mood all the time. Don't you want to be that guy? Like, even if somebody is known to be like an extremely sour person or a bitter person, and you just go to them and they're like instantly, oh, I love this person and I shall give you perfect, better treatment, and I will always get the window seat at the at this thing in my flights or in my bus while I'm traveling because I just spoke to the conductor or the person who's checking me in nicely. So I'd love to be that guy. So that's the advantage of following himself, right? Anyway, so moving on to the topic at hand today. So this is about the yama of Satya. So this is the second yama, Satya. Okay. So Satya obviously translates to truth, right? Like, truth is bigger than just fact. Fact is actually subject to change. For example, the 13-year-old Shweta did not like pink, and that's a fact, right? But Shweta can go on to like another color or start to like pink as she grows older. I like pink. So, I mean, things do change, right? Even facts are subject to change. For example, we probably at one point in time thought that the atom was the smallest indivisible part of, of of any substance, right? It is the smallest thing that we could see, right? But we obviously went even smaller, quoting quoting Phoebe from Friends. We went even smaller than the atom, and a whole mess crap came out. So yeah, I mean, things facts change because what we call the truth depends a lot on the scenery or what we see and our perspective. If you've ever been a person who has been in the middle of a fight when two of your other friends are fighting, you will know this, that somebody did something wrong or right is always very, very subjective. So your one friend is saying that this person did this, and your other friend is saying that that person did that. Now you don't know what the truth is, and maybe whatever they both are saying are facts, but you cannot come to a distilled understanding of what the truth of the matter is, because they both have their own truth, because it depends on their own perspective. So what we must understand to get into the mind of a yogi is to understand the difference between the scenery and the seer, right? So the scenery is never the truth, okay? The seer is. So there will be parts of you that keep on changing, right? You probably thought that one thing is cool one day and thought that the other thing is cool the next. And that's normal, because your opinion on something is never the truth. No feeling is final, no thought is final, and nothing in the world or that you see around you is final. So nothing, everything is going through change. Every single thing, including what you call your body, your personality, your mind, everything is going through change, right? So nothing would classify as the truth, not the scenery, and not even your perspective. You might have a different perspective as a child, and you might have a different perspective as a mother, right? So understanding that none of this that you associate yourself with is the truth, but there is a certain part of you, a small part of you that never changes, the part of you that laughs out loud, the part of you that starts to cry, which is the same, which essentially has not gone through any change. um, to give you context, you would not be able to perceive change if everything had changed. Something would have to remain stationary to perceive movement, if you know what I mean. So that very thing is the truth according to the Vedas. So like our Guruji Sri Sri Ravi Shankar says that when Buddha achieved enlightenment, he said it's nothing. There is no God, there is no seer, right? There is nothing. Nothingness is the truth, right? Uh, but our Guruji asks, yes, but who perceived the nothingness? That is the truth. So it is not nothingness, that is Atman, or that is the truth. Okay? Uh, so being established in that part of yourself, the unchanging, the part that is just observing, right, is being established in Satya. And I know it is very, very hard to be established in this, because the very fact that you are detached from what you see around you, or even your perspective, means that you are more unbiased, you are more centered, and you can see the truth more clearly, That is why a judge has to be impartial. That is why a doctor who's operating on you should not know you personally, because all of these things will take them out of their center, will make them out of alignment and not be able to function at their highest potential. And as I've told you all before, yoga is only about uh, functioning at your absolute highest potential. So because this takes you out of your center, it is uh, one should be in the practice of remaining in satya, which is of not being attached to the scenery or your perspective, but in the seer, right? So yeah, detachment is what takes you towards that, right? So so as usual, our Patanjali also gave us like a little advantage of following Satya. They say that if you follow Satya, which is not only the art of speaking the truth, but also being natural within yourself, like, just not copying anybody, not doing something because you should, would, could, like, but being established in a completely centered way, basically make sure that every action or every sankalpa or every intention of yours is fructified. Because when you're established in Satya, when you're that centered, usually you are in alignment with the universe and the flow or the Tao of things. So usually you are that, because you are not a personality anymore, you're not a character, you're not your perspective. You are this beautiful limitless being that is established in Satya. So because you're in alignment with the universe, whatever you are perceiving of, intending of, is channeled directly through you, and therefore it is fructified. So this is the advantage of being in Satya. And the end of this slightly complex but very interesting episode of Soulfully Smart. I'll see you next time.